with it. Excellent. Okay, let's get started with this. We have, online trainings, just want to do some housekeeping here. Who's having any issues with the online trainings? Questions, comments, stuck spots, anything?
Not really a question or anything super important, but I saw on the full module list where each individual module says completed after we've done it. Some of them have check marks and some don't, and everything inside of each module I've completed, so I'm not sure. And it seems to be the ones that are instructor-led training that don't have the check mark. So I'm wondering if that's something that you guys have to do or if it's on us.
Yeah, usually if it's the stuff that you guys have done during the week before you lead up to me, I do have to mark down. I have to mark down everybody that's attended, and if I don't do that on a timely basis, and you get into it before I do that, then you're right. It can stop you. But here's the thing: if it's not checked, or if there's something that does say completed, but you're able to move on, and we'll do an audit at the end of the class to make sure that you've got credit for everything that you've accomplished. So don't worry so much about each and everything being checked. But if it's stopping you from doing something, yeah, get a hold of me to make sure that we can get you going in the right direction. But I need to timely check you guys in. So after today's class, I'll be taking attendance in the middle of the class. But as soon as the class ends, I need to put it in there. Sometimes it glitches. I put it in there as like 3 or 4 people that don't get approval that they've attended. I don't know what happens there, but so again, part of that's on me, but for the most part, if you can move on to the next module, please do.
Got it.
Any other questions? Okay. Just make sure after taking that exam last week that if you did pass, that you scan and upload your certificates in. I want to make sure that you get credit. For graduation, you just need the 4 certificates. If you already got the
What's
tips,
the last name?
Bernardo B.
I feel that.
I'm going to.
Would they have something like they
It was on
charged
the
Okay.
23rd.
Kelly, mute yourself.
I got mute on everybody right now. If you need to unmute yourself, please do. But yeah, so here's the thing on the certificates. If you could upload those. If you didn't take the test or you have to retake, no problem. But there's really 4 things that we check you in on, actually 5, all of the certificates. And then we want to make sure that you've done the project, which we'll talk about today, and then just completing all 25 individual modules. There's 12 modules that you guys do by yourself called the e-learning. There's 12 modules that you do with me, 6 online, 6 in person, and then the completion of just the completion of all of them. You got the pre-week to as far as your 25th one. So again, just update those, send me those certificates, because if they do the audit and they can't find it in your upload, then they're going to call me and I'm going to call you, and you're going to have to send me your certificate. So when you get a chance, scan those in somewhere and upload those. I believe those are in the e-learning part, week 4. It asks you to do that. So anything else before we move on? You got to unmute if you're trying to talk, because I muted everybody. So, okay, let's move on. Or put it in if you got a comment, put it in the comment section. So financial management. So just a little word on financial management. So many of you may not have been exposed to this part of the business, but you may in the future. And this is what this part of the class is about, is that giving you insight on some of the things that your managers or your managers may be involved with on a day-to-day basis. We're not going to get into the weeds a whole lot, but we're going to kind of explain some of the concepts. And the caveat here is that we're going old school. We're going to explain some of the formulas that you may see on the exam, and don't worry, you don't have to memorize the formula. What the exam will do is it'll give you the formula, and then it'll give you the variables, and you just have to make sure that you plug the variables in the right way. So if it's looking for a solution, they'll give you 2 of the 3 variables. You got to just know how to do the third variable, that type of thing. So and I'll express the point when we get to those on what things will be on the exam, so that you guys can be prepared. But you don't have to memorize anything. I will, after class, I will send you some of the most common formulas. But here's the thing: most of our point of sale systems, our apps, and our software, our Excel spreadsheets that we already have in the business handles almost all of this stuff automatically. We just put in the right numbers and it calculates things for us. But we're going old school so you can get some really meaning behind the scenes and this is how it works type of thing. So please don't think if you need to ask questions, please do. Because again, a lot of times we just punch in numbers in our point of sale system and it just gives us the answers. So we'll go as slow as we possibly can, but let us know how we can answer any questions that you might have. Okay, Joe, no issue. If you're following along, that's great. So I just remember that when we take attendance. So let's get into this. So the things that we're going to talk about today: menu item pricing, the sales mix of what that looks like, what's forecasting and budgeting all about, how do we prepare food and labor budgets, because obviously we only have so much money to spend, and we want to make sure that we are under or at least right to that line. Understanding how to budget for profit and managing for profit, what that does to the different aspects of your business, and then managing variance or any discrepancies, anything that is off. We're going to talk about that as well. Okay. Did I have another question here? Yeah, if you upload a certificate, can you still take the test to renew? Absolutely right. Yep. I just want to make sure that you're covered. So Nicole or Nick, that's he asked the question: if we upload the certificate, can we still take it? Absolutely right. So everybody has the opportunity to take all 4 exams and get all 4 certificates going forward. Okay. So food and beverage prices. Interesting that we want to make sure that we're talking the same language. So when somebody says food prices, a lot of times they lump beverages in there. So we want to be clear: food and beverage prices. We want to explain the relationship between price, value, revenue, and profits, which we do. We won't go into the profit and loss in this particular module, but again, we'll reference that. And then some of the methods that managers use to establish food and beverage prices. Okay, so what goes into a menu pricing? Obviously, the value. You're trying to create value, and value really is revenue, cost, profit, and prices all kind of rolled into one. Believe it or not, your competition is a factor in price. So we want to make sure that we are checking out our competitors. It's not like we need to be beholden to our competitors or in lockstep. We don't have to do everything that they're doing, but we want a good idea on where they are so that we can either react or that we can take advantage of some things that are going on with our competition. Okay. When we're talking about competition, how do we know that there are competitors? What gives us away? Because not every restaurant, hotel is created equal. How do we know if somebody is our competitors? Who would like to throw something out? Serving the same clientele, right? They're coming in for the same type of meal. Thanks, Caitlin. Appreciate that. Similar services. Thanks, Brandon. Anything else? The price, absolutely. Price. Atmosphere. And atmosphere probably, I'm going to think, Charlie, that probably atmosphere probably means the decor, how the aesthetics are of the restaurant as well, right? So very good, guys. So that's exactly right. That's part of the process when we're talking about our competitors. So in the menu selection, we certainly, pricing is extremely important. The value of something that we're getting is extremely important. Service level, right, as far as our competitors, our decor, one that we didn't mention, but is also important, the reputation, somebody that's been potentially around a long time or just has a reputation for doing things a certain way. So again, different types of things can go into who our competitors are. So when we're balancing all the revenue, cost, profit, and prices, there's really two, oops, let me get this out of the way here. There's two things that we really want to understand here is that the contribution margin, which we'll talk about, goes into the menu price. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And again, our competitors and what they do is extremely important. So pricing methods. When we get into pricing, we've got a couple of different ways to kind of price things out on the menu. One's called the contribution margin method. The other one's called the food cost percentage method. And if you think about it, it's one's kind of reverse of the other. And then the last thing we talk about certainly in the restaurant business is called the Q factor, which we'll talk about in a moment. So regardless of the method that we use, we really want to start our process by using historical data, right? So we want to make sure that we understand what we have charged in the past, what we're going to forecast or budget for in the future. And most of the time we rely on our point of sale system for calculating all this. It has the software and the apps available on that particular system that you use and get trained on. So again, we don't have to stretch our math minds too far because a lot of this stuff is done for us. On the other hand, the contribution margin method goes a little bit further, in that we certainly want to take into consideration the number of customers, contribution margin menu price, which we'll talk about, menu item food cost, that type of thing. So when it comes right down to it, we want to know what our average ticket cost is, or ticket revenue and ticket cost is, so that we can start to budget based on the size of our dining room and those types of things. So again, some things that go into this that you might not be super familiar with, we're not going to get in the details. We're going to kind of keep it 30,000 foot, but if you have questions, please don't hesitate. And then the last thing we kind of had on that last slide, or excuse me, on this slide, was the Q factor, and really is how do we account for all those extras, things like lemon slices and just the different things, the butter slabs and the jams or jellies if you serve breakfast, and the syrups and those types of things. Not everybody orders those, but how do we take that into consideration? So most operations will kind of roll that extra cost into each entree as a certain percentage, and we'll walk through that scenario. But that's called the Q factor for all those little extra items that we have, but we don't necessarily put an exact cost to. Any questions, comments, thoughts here? Okay. So the type of costs, we know that a successful restaurant or food service operation, it really needs to manage and control many different types of costs. First and foremost, this is what if we want to lump things together, this next second bullet point would really be called prime costs. We're going to come back to that later, but these food, beverage, and labor costs are your prime costs. You should know what that cost is on an ongoing basis, right? And for most operations, it's around 65% of your total revenue. 65% for your food, beverage, and labor, all added together. If you keep it under 65%, that's a great start. There's other variables involved, but if you can keep your prime costs under 65%, that's a huge start. The types of costs we got out there: variable and semi-variable costs. These are controllable costs. And so what happens here, these can change, and these can change on sales. So if we're a very popular restaurant and we see, the hockey stick type of chart as far as growth, our revenue's growing, but also our costs are growing. It kind of moves in lockstep with the revenue. And the reason is that it's the food and the beverage and the labor. And if we're serving more people food, our food revenue goes up, but our costs go up too. It just lockstep. We're serving more drinks, our beverage costs go up. And if we're having more people, in the dining room, that means we need more wait staff, more cooks. Everybody needs to, we have to have a more well-balanced labor force in the facility because we want to continue to provide good service, so our labor costs go up. So these types of things can go up and down. So that's where we talk about variable and semi-variable. Again, these are controllable because we can ask people to go home. We can change items on the menu or change the suppliers that we use, that type of thing. So that's variable and semi-variable cost. Overhead cost is a fixed or non-controllable cost. So this is the same month in, month out. So this means it needs to be paid regardless of whether the operation is making or losing money. So if you don't own your building, that's one of them. The lease or rent that you pay, it doesn't matter if you got a full dining room or nobody's coming in, we have to pay that. Utilities, somewhat of a fixed cost. It will go up and down based on, if we're really busy and we're firing up, the stove and ovens more, that will move, but it won't move in a huge percentage. So again, those are really called overhead or fixed costs, and fixed costs do not change based on an operation's sales. Okay. Cost control, huge aspect of the business, right? A huge aspect of the general manager and the managers that are responsible for that in the restaurant or facility. Regardless if it's hospitality or not, every business needs to make more money than it spends in order to survive. You can only go so long and then until, the bank comes calling for any loans or we just can't make payroll, that kind of stuff. So we need to make more money than we spend in order to survive. So sales and revenue have to be higher than cost. The word revenue, income, sales, they're all means the same thing. I don't know why we have so many words for that, but they're thrown around and sometimes we lose track. But revenue is the income from sales before expenses. This is the total amount of money that's just incoming into your facility. And so that can come from a couple of different places. Primarily, it comes from what you sell to the customer, right? But you could have a catering service. So, that's a second source of income. Maybe you have merchandising. You sell, sweatshirts, t-shirts, mugs, anything that's associated with your operation. That could be another type of revenue or income. So again, you get a main one and then you have offshoots of that depending on how your operation is set up. And then the cost is really the price that the operation pays out in the purchasing of food and other items, cleaning supplies, regardless, and preparation of the products or providing of its services. Questions, comments here? Okay, moving on. So let's talk a little bit about the menu sales mix analysis, right? We want to make sure that your learning objectives is that you're able to describe the procedure used to analyze a menu sales mix, and this will be on the exam, not this particular piece, but when we get to it. So it'll be easy to recognize when you get to the exam. We want to state the process used to adjust menu items and prices. So when we are into selecting things on the menu to kind of understand how well or not well they're doing, we want to understand how popular they are. So select items to compare, determine the menu mix percentage and the popularity. Again, we'll go over this in a second. Compare the menu items popularity, and then determine the menu item and how much they contribute to the bottom line, because we know that you don't sell the exact same number of items on your menu. Some things are more popular, some things are more profitable, some things are both. But again, we need to do some type of an analysis from time to time to make sure that we're staying on top of it. You'd hate to have, 2 or 3 things on that menu that just aren't selling. It's taking up space on something that you might be able to sell or that might be more popular. But again, that's something that we need to analyze from time to time. And then determine the average contribution margin and profitability, and then compare menu items compare the menu item average contribution margin, and then classify the menu items that you have. So here's the way we classify on the exam. This you'll need to know kind of what this is going forward, right? So if we have a star item, which a menu item that's a star, we know that it's high in profitability, but also high in popularity. So that's a win-win. So if we have a bunch of those on our menu, that's awesome. Those are star items. But we know that not everything can be a star item, but maybe it can. I mean, you guys know, you guys have in your restaurant on campus there, you have things on the menu that are, that you probably can predict that everybody orders. But again, star items on the menu, very high in profitability and very high in popularity. The puzzle is, it's low in profitability, but high in popularity. How can we, I'm sorry, it's the other way around. High in profitability, but low in popularity. That's the puzzle we're trying to understand. So what can we do to that particular menu item to make it more popular? So it's puzzling in that, boy, it's not super popular, but it's very high in profitability. So trying to understand what's going on there, maybe there's some tweaks that we could do going forward. When we're talking about a plow horse, and this is where some familiar menu items might be hamburgers, or a staple that you guys have always served and that kind of stuff. High popularity, but we know that it's not a high profit item. We have it, we price it appropriately, and we just know it sells a lot, but we know that it's not going to bring a lot of profitability. Is there anything that we can do to a so-called plow horse to make it more profitable? And there are certain levers that you can pull. Maybe you can buy from another supplier, but you have to watch out because you don't want the quality to go down because it's a high popular item. And if we change too much, now it could potentially enter into the puzzle area. So again, something to think about. So star, puzzle, plow horse, and then of course we have our low profitability and low popularity. So we need to do something with those types of menu items. And again, maybe we completely take it off or we tweak it somehow, that kind of thing. When we're managing those, any item that is above, there's certain different things that we can do. We could try to, outside of the menu, we can kind of promote the item as a special or put it on a sandwich board in front, or, pair it with something else, buy different, buy 2 meals at a reduced cost. Again, trying to manage it to promote an item that might not be very popular and see how that goes. We might leave it alone and let it perform, especially if it's a star and it's a plow horse. But again, we need to make those determinations. And again, as I said, if we're going to do any tweaking, we need to maintain quality standards, because the people that order this particular menu item all the time are going to let you know. If you've tweaked it too much and the taste is different or the quality standards are different, they'll let you know. Okay. And then maybe we move the items around on the menu. We know that, the most popular area of a menu is, depending on how many pages you have in your menu. Certainly if it's a 1-pager, you got front and back, it's the front side, mostly on the right-hand side of the menu. If it's got pages, and you got a cover on the menu, then it's the first page to the right when you open the menu. That's typically the high visibility. That's the first place people typically look. And that usually that menu item that's placed there does really well. So if you're going to start playing around with your menu, you have to know some of these things as well. Maybe you move it there momentarily to see if anything is different about the ordering, statistics that happen. But again, those are some of the things that you have at your discretion to either pull that lever or push that button to see if there's any changes. Anybody have any questions so far on this? Okay, let's keep moving. So when we're managing those dog items, as we talked about, we have to do something. We just can't let it sit there, because what's happening, if it's a dog items on the menu, we have to have it available, right? And if we have to have it available, that means somebody's ordering the food that would take to make this item. So again, we could be wasting food on the back end if we cannot move certain things on the menu, right? So we need to come up with a decision. Are we going to eliminate that item? Are we going to replace it with something else? If we replace it with something else, or maybe we increase the profitability by doing certain things to that particular item to dress it up so that it's more desirable. So again, trying to understand what's going on here. So some decisions that you'd have to come up with based on the factors that you have in your own facility. And then what are we going to do? How are we going to tweak the puzzles and the plow horses? So do we remove them? It's an option, but both these have at least somewhat positive outlook, right? The plow horses are popular, they're just not very profitable. And the puzzles are profitable, they're just not very popular. So what can we do to change that up? Do we indeed replace it with a new item? Potentially. But again, there's some risk in that because again, we'll take one of the two, but we certainly don't want to replace it with a new item that's total dud and ends up being that dog that, ends up that nobody orders regardless. And we end up with wasted food, or we've got to come up with plan B and do some specials and create something different. Questions, comments here? Okay, hopefully I haven't
But
watched.
the puzzle classification in the reading material, it mentioned one of the managing techniques would be to switch the puzzle item to the more visible menu location, but you said to leave the star there, so that's sort of conflicting.
No, I didn't say you have to. I said if you do, there's risk involved, especially if you've been around a while and a star is performing really well. That certainly is an option. But you could decrease the sales of your star item as well. So that's always an option. There's no hard and fast rule, but there might be the reason that it's a star item. It's that it's got the best place on the menu. People open it up, and it's right there. You have a great picture. It's priced appropriately, and it's selling really well. Now, if you move that around and put that plow horse or that puzzle there, you need to monitor it because again, what's happening to that? Is it picking up steam? Is it not? It doesn't matter where you move it, that type of thing. So you just want to be careful, but you can move stars out of that spot. You just have to make sure that you're making sure that you're monitoring it over a certain period of time. And then if it's not catching on fire, then, and of course you're monitoring your star menu item as well as the one you moved into its place. So good thought, Brandon. Thank you so much for let me clarify that. So getting into some forecasting and budgeting, okay? What we'll learn here is kind of, explain the purpose of operation budgets and forecasts, describing some restaurant budgeting and forecasting methods, and explain how forecast revenue and these expenses. So I'm going to move this out of the way. So up in the upper right-hand corner here is just a quick P&L, profit and loss statement. It's really basic, right? But the way it's kind of laid out, it has your sales up here, your food, beverage, and then your total sales. And this could be for a month or for a year, depending on the size of the operation, or a quarter. And then you have the cost of sales. And this would be your prime cost without the labor. So you get these things separated, and then you have all your controllable, you have your controllable expenses down here, and then you have some of your non-controllable expenses. So all the way down the bottom line, you have your profit, right? So it kind of gives us an accounting of what we've done over a certain period of time. So the operating budget is a financial plan for a specific period of time. So whether that's a week, a couple of weeks, a quarter, a month, or even a year, the operational budget we try to do ahead of time so that we can kind of, see where we are. Well, this is what our plan is. How far are we off? The more we do an operating budget, the better we become. The more we do a forecast, the better we become at it. So an operation budget is kind of a financial plan. A forecast is a prediction of sales levels or costs that will occur during a specific period of time. And we know we can grab a budget again, from our point of sale system, will tell us what we did last year, and we're probably going to do somewhat the same this year, but maybe we're going to grow a little bit. So that's where the forecast comes in place. It's our prediction of what maybe we're going to do additionally. Sometimes, and this is hopefully not a whole lot of time, sometimes our forecast might be less than the year before based on, I had a couple of summers ago, I was doing this, and I was up in Traverse City, and a huge, very high level hotel up there that sits on the water. They had major construction in front. So their forecast for the months that the construction was going to be out front was certainly less than it had been the year prior. But you have to be realistic. If you know that people can't get to you easily, and it's just a nightmare trying to get around, especially during your busy hours, lunch and supper, if those are your busiest. So again, try to be realistic. So forecasting is a prediction. And the reason that they're not the same, the operating budget forecast, we're going to apply some things to it like marketing. Maybe we're going to try to push certain menu items, or a festival that we have going on internal, or for a specific time. And you've seen these advertisements on whatever streaming service you use and that kind of stuff. Somebody's running an all-you-can-eat buffet somewhere, or they have a seafood menu for a short period of time that they don't normally have, and those types of things. So again, forecasting is a way to predict what sales are going to happen based on the marketing and the things that we're doing internally to open up potentially additional business. We know that forecasting techniques do rely heavily on historical data. We need a place to start, so our budget will come into play. But we know the most food service revenue forecasting techniques always comes down to the number of customers, that we're comparing the number of customers that we feel we're going to get. And again, we can look back in our history and say, on Tuesdays of every week, this is the average numbers of customers that come through our doors. That's an easy number to get because our point of sale system will have that. The other number that they'll have is our average sales per customer. So we can forecast our sales for the most part pretty accurate, but we're not going to be right on the button, maybe once in a great while, but it's just an average, right? And we know prices go up and down, our clientele come and go, that type of thing. Our sales history, again, a record number of portions of every item sold on the menu. We're going to know that, right? So we know how popular our menu items are, how many have been, and maybe there's something that on a Thursday night, or let's just pick Tuesday because it's easy. We know our Taco Tuesdays go, everybody comes on Tuesdays for tacos, and those seem to outdistance any other day of the week. So there could be some different things in your area that goes on. But again, we've captured that. We know how many meals and things that we sell on a certain day, in certain weeks, during certain months, on Mother's Day, on that Sunday, those types of things. We're going to have a pretty good history of that. And again, as I've said, operations, you can run historical data any way you want to see it from your point of sale system. Questions, comments, thoughts here? Okay. So we hit on this before. Every business, regardless if it's a hospitality, needs to rely on that basic principle to survive. It must make more money than we spend, right? Pretty straightforward. So food costs, beverage costs, labor costs, these are the prime costs that we talked about, right? So they each have a component that are related to the sales level. Your operating budget is a financial plan for a specific period of time. This is what we expect. Our budget is, yep, that's what we think we're going to do in this certain time period. And it lists the anticipated sales revenue and projected costs and gives an estimate of the profit. So everything's covered, right? Profit or loss for that expected for the period that we're going to study. So again, we're trying to have our hand on the pulse of what's going on. And then, as I said, the P&L. The P&L report is really a compilation of sales and cost information for that specific period of time. So it's really a report. It's done. It's already over. It just shows the history of what's happened. So there's certain things in your budget, going back to the budget, that are short term, and there's certain things that are long-term. And let's just go through some of those examples. Expected revenue and estimated profit and loss. So what information must be included in the budget? Your short-term and long-term budgets, and it really is weekly, monthly, twice a year, and yearly. Your weekly and your monthly would probably be your short-term. Your annual would probably be more of a long-term budget there. So yeah, short-term, week to months in the future, that's kind of what your budget would be. If food costs goes up, now you can check your variance and go, okay, we've got to account for that because the food costs have go up, and when we budgeted back in beginning of January, we didn't take that into account, didn't have any idea that that was going to happen. A long-term budget could even be longer, could be 3 to 5 years, and this is where we'd have to do some forecasting, and that wouldn't just be food, that would be any addition to the facility, any expansion, any type of theme difference, rebranding, or anything like that would go into that as well. And certainly we know a long-term budget can change over time. Something that would really go along into the long-term budget, any capital expenditures that happen, right? So these are the larger cost items, not the day-to-day stuff, but maybe a new walk-in cooler because the current cooler is having some issues. We've had to call service or maintenance a couple of times, and it's getting down to the very end, or hopefully it doesn't happen a whole lot. It's actually totally went down, and now we've got to scramble and get something because we tried to hang on to it too long. And accidents do happen as well. Any capital expenditure budgets, such as a new parking lot, a new addition to the building, new roof, those types of new furnace or heater or boiler, those types of things would be those capital expenditures, and that we would do over a longer term. We wouldn't take the hit in one budget year for the whole thing because it's just too expensive. And that, again, money, the property, the equipment that you use, items that cost more than a specific amount, and I'm sure your management team knows what that is, and they would divide that up over, we call it depreciation. We would depreciate that over so many years so that we'd take a hit gradually as opposed to a one-time charge. So these would include those large purchases, and then planning for any future events or expansion, and we get that data typically. It's historical data that's already in our system, and then we lean on what's going on currently and what the current climate is, and then of course we would do the forecasting for the future. So again, revenue forecast is just our prediction, right? What's going to happen in the next week, month, quarter, or year. So we know that it's historical one, that's where we start, but do we want to pull some levers that will help us grow? So from historical, we want to know what's going on currently, what's going on, maybe there's events in the area and those types of things. So it's really that prediction of what's needed, and will you expect it to increase or decrease? Most of the time it's increasing, but sometimes we have that odd year. COVID, nobody expected that. I'm sure there was a few decreases there. And again, we have to affix our marketing budgets accordingly because we're going to use some of those marketing dollars to boost sales revenue of our items. So what we need to understand any planned marketing and promotional data. If we have some of that data at our discretion, how can we use it to, forecast and use it in our current marketing budgets going forward? This is the forecast and budgets are always the baseline. That's the start. How can we enhance different areas of our business? Things that can impact any revenue forecasting, something to think about when we're doing our budgets and our forecasting. How about any large events that happen to be in your area that people are going to now use your facility that they wouldn't normally use? So if you're in a town that hosts the Super Bowl, you're not getting it every year, but you know what? It's certainly going to impact your facility. More rooms, more meals. It's just going to be a fuller, type of atmosphere, and it's going to fill your event space, that type of thing. If you are yourself doing any promotions or you're partnering with anybody doing promotions, maybe you've had a new competitor move in and it's starting to drain some of your business, or you've had a competitor close, and now you're getting increased business because of lack of options, those types of things. Yes, believe it or not, local news. If all of a sudden there was a issue with maybe some local break-ins in your area, maybe it'll stop clientele from coming down, or if there's been just some bad news in your area. But it could be the other side too, where somebody promotes a different thing that's going on, a festival that's going on in your area. So the local news can have an effect on a day-to-day basis. Certainly in Michigan, weather can have an effect on people that visit your dining room. So again, we have the blizzard like we had a couple of weeks ago, or the bad weather that could keep people off the roads, and all of a sudden the Tuesday night where we're expecting 180 people in our dining room, we get 8. So again, some of those things that happen. And guests, okay, so it just depends. It could be that somebody was on a field trip and all of a sudden a big tour bus pulls into the parking lot, and all of a sudden we have people that we didn't predict, that kind of thing. Any comments, questions, thoughts here? Okay, so right now it's 1:44. Come back at 1:55. We'll continue again, but right now we're going to have a break, and then we'll take attendance. But take a break 10 minutes, and then we'll reconvene in 10 minutes at 1:55. 11 minutes. See you then. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the budgets and before, and the forecasting. We're going to talk about how to prepare them a little bit more in depth, right? So the learning objectives that you have really are just kind of, you'll be able to describe how to prepare food and labor cost budgets. So let's get right into it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the total food cost percentage. This is the relationship between sales and the cost of food to achieve those sales. So sales, as we know, it's, again, revenue, income, sales, all means the same thing. But total cost percentage is really the cost of food to achieve those sales. And so we'll run through some examples here. Really, it's all about analyzing food cost percentage by comparing it to company standards. The companies that you work for already know where they want to be. They have budgeted, they want to forecast, and they say they need to have a percentage of this amount. And it's really based upon what they've done in the past, in their historical. They could even do it as far as industry standards, because they're constantly comparing and getting information from the industry on where it should be. So again, this is a number that's probably going to be already predisposed to you. You're going to know what that is, and that's the number that you're going to shoot to try to be underneath. To determine the percentage, again, one of those formulas that's going to be on the exam, but you don't need to memorize it. To determine the percentage, you divide the total food cost by the sales. So the higher number is going to be the sales. The food cost is what that it's going to cost to get that food in-house. And so in formula, so total food cost divided by sales equals the food cost percentage. So be careful here, because when it says sales, does that mean it's just food? It's food and beverage. So you have to be clear here. Is it total food cost? Does that include beverage, or does it not? Does sales include your beverage or not? So again, you want to be clear on what those variables are, but that's how to find food cost percentage. We know food cost is variable, right? It should increase or decrease in direct proportion to an increase in the or decrease in the overall sales. So food cost decreases or increases with respect to your overall sales if all the standards and food controls are followed properly, because what could skew that is that if we're not using the standards, such as measuring things appropriately in recipes. We've talked about that already. If we don't measure things properly in a simple recipe, or our portion controls or our portion amounts are off, then this could really affect food costs and could throw our numbers off. So, and somebody's going to come looking for that. We also know that in order to run the business, it's more than just food and beverage costs, right? We have our labor costs in there as well. So we have to understand how that operates within our budgets. So that being said, it's semi-variable, right? It's a controllable cost because there's certain things that we can do. We can send people home, the wait staff home, or the back of the house. I mean, maybe we don't need as many cooks or sous chefs or that kind of stuff. So labor costs are tied to sales, but not directly because, again, we might need an extra body or two to maintain certain service quality. It just depends on what's going on. And the more you're in this business, the more you're managing this business and seeing what's going on, the better you are at it. So you know, and I'm sure you're no different, that your operations have both full-time and you have part-time staff. Got to be aware of the fluctuations in your sales so that you just have the right amount on staff to handle customers efficiently. So we know that there's going to be people that open and you're not going to be fully staffed right away, but maybe there's an event going on and maybe you are fully staffed right away. So again, you're trying to handle that with the budgeting costs that you're being given. Certainly an important part of management function, right? To make sure that the payroll cost is in line. We don't want to be too far off. If we're going to be off, a couple of handful of dollars, that's probably understood. But if we're off a couple $1,000, that's probably not understood. But we all know there's exceptions to these standards as well. Sometimes things happen and we need to deal with that. So the idea of labor cost is a standard the restaurant uses to budget for staffing needs. So it represents what management predicts will happen. So these things are already laid out, or maybe you're in a level at the company here that you're making determinations on what's going to happen here. So again, this stuff's not a mystery. It's been going on for a long time. You're going to use all the items at your disposal, whether it's software, your point of sale, use it all in conjunction, and you're going to come up with what your ideal labor cost is per day, per week, per month, per shift, if you need to do it that way. So running some examples here. So when we're going to talk about labor costs, we want to calculate the total available labor dollars for all the positions that we have checking in that day. We certainly have to subtract costs of benefits and other deductions. We subtract any fixed labor costs, and then what we have left is that we distribute to our hourly positions. And then we'll manage those hourly positions based on our need and making sure that the quality standard that we have, that is expected of us, is that something that we can hit. Now, we want to budget the cost of labor because our labor cost percentage is budgeted cost of labor divided by the revenue forecast. So already some of these formulas we're going to already have down. And so we know how much labor and the money that we have for labor, but also what our labor cost percentage is. And then another formula is our sales forecast times our labor cost percentage, which we figured out up above, is going to be our daily dollars available for labor. Now remember, these are formulas going to be on the exam, but they're going to give you numbers to plug in here so that they're just asking you to go through the process. They'll give you sales forecast and dollars for labor. They want to know the labor cost percentage. And so you'll just do the math backwards there. But again, all this stuff is not, if you are in management, if you aspire to be management, they're not going to make you use these formulas. Typically, we're putting these numbers are already readily available for you out of your point of sale or your Excel or your financial software, whatever it is. So keeping going, let's put some numbers to this. So if we had a sales forecast of $24,000 and we already know our labor cost percentage because we either figured it out or it's a number that in our facility we're going to adhere to, that it's 28%, we know our dollars for labor available for labor, it's going to be $6,722, right? So long form, we need to subtract, just like what you see up at the top, we need to, number 2 there, we need to subtract costs of benefits and deductions, which is going to be the fixed cost labor, any taxes available, health insurance benefits, employee meals if there are, vacation, sick leave, all that kind of stuff, etc. So if we know our dollars available for labor, 66,720, we need to minus all that stuff that you see down at the bottom there. And then we're going to have the final number for what's available for our payroll. So payroll dollars available, again, we need to make sure that we're taking the fixed cost salaries out, right? Dollars available for employees receiving straight wages, and then distribute the remaining labor dollars among our hourly positions. Front and back of the house wages and those types of things. And we want to make sure when we talk about covers, making sure we have enough people that we have enough people to be able to give our guests the service that they expect. So again, another formula could be our covers per server or guests per servers per hour. So we want to know that we're going to be able to cover what's available in the dining room, or do we have to close part of the dining room, or do we have to ask people to come in, or do we have to send people home based on what we feel is going to happen in that dining room. So again, some of the formulas available that you'll be seeing on the exam, but again, your numbers will be given to you. Just got to know how they go. Just follow the formula and you'll get the right cost. Unfortunately, the exam is in multiple choice. I don't think they're trying to trip you up, but just beware. Questions, comments here? Okay. Didn't go here. Let's see here what's going on. There we go. When we're talking about profit, bottom line is, we got to turn a profit. So really, budgeting is not something that we take lightly. It's really important, and we're going to really talk about how it relates to profitability here. We certainly want to understand calculating the average number of customers that we have per night, per meal, those types of things. It certainly helps our forecasts, our budgeting numbers, and that type of thing. Our willingness to add additional people if we need to because we expect a bump, or to let people go home or stop working because we're expecting some type of a shortfall. And then calculate product cost percentage and break-even points on when we start making a profit based on revenues and number of customers and that type of thing. And we're going to talk about what throughput is and flow through. So break-even point, it really takes into account your variable and fixed expenses, right? Fixed expenses could be, as we talked about before, your lease, any loans that you are repaying, any marketing costs that you're incurring, administrative fixed costs there, which it could include salaries and that type of thing, and then any minimum hourly payments as far as that goes. Okay. So your variable expenses, they are certainly expressed as a percentage. You want to see them that way. They can go, your variable expenses, as we've talked about, will go up and down with sales. These could be linen costs, energy costs. You'd like to have more control over these, which you will when we're talking about the hourly labor. You certainly have control over that, but some you don't really have control over them because they'll go up and down based on sales. So what can you influence? You can control your food costs, right? You can certainly try to make sure that you're using everything that has been purchased. You can save energy with some sort of a schedule, making sure you're only turning on the appliances that you need and not keeping it on all day, if that's indeed something that you can control. Trying to make trade-offs with certain things going on. You want to be proactive, not just things as usual, looking for things that you can kind of influence or control. So again, what you try to do is really understand, if you've got your variable cost percentage, you subtract that away from 100% and you get your gross profit margin. And really, that's a number that most industries adhere to, that there's a number that your management will let you know, this is where we're operating in the the positive part or in the black, or if we're operating the red. And that's really the just of the break-even point. We want to get to a certain level each day that we're operating where we're making money. And so when we take into consideration our weekly fixed expenses divided by the gross profit margin, that's where we get our break even. And it tells us exactly where we need to be daily that we're turning a profit once we reach that level. Questions, comments here? I know it's probably a little deep. Again, formulas will be given to you. You just got to know where they'll give you a couple different variables and have you put in the numbers. Let's talk a little bit about your contribution margin, and this could go for the different aspects of the food on your menu and that kind of stuff. So sales minus your variable cost gives you your contribution margin, right? You can figure out your contribution margin per guests, per guest, or you can just do it as a percentage. An example would be, so if we had sales of 120,000 and we knew our contribution margin, which we should know, it's given to us, of 60%, that if we divide 120 by the 60%, we'll get 200,000. So we know, maybe this is a weekly number or a monthly number, we know we need to get to $200,000 before we start making money. So our fixed cost is 120, our contribution percentage is 60%, and we need to get to 200,000. Just good to know. But again, your systems are going to give you that automatically. You can plug in variables to play with it a little bit, but it kind of shares it out is that we're trying to push for, maximum, our dining room full to the max, making sure we're doing the right things. And then if we're trying to figure it out per guest, if we know our fixed cost is 120,000 and our average check per guest, I know this is really low, but it's just an example, is $4. We know that that's 30,000 customers we'd have to have. So the break even for the year we would need to have in our dining room 30,000 customers before we could break even. Once we get to that plateau, then anything over that would start to hit the bottom line as far as profit. Questions, comments here? So really graphically, what we see in that is that, yes, our costs are going to be at a certain level, and the idea is to get our total revenue or sales to a certain price that we are breaking even on a constant basis, whether it's per day, per meal, per day, per week, per month, that kind of stuff. We're not always going to hit it. There are going to be those days that are the exceptions, but that's what we're trying to accomplish, is get to a profit, to a spot where we're making money on an ongoing basis. Switching gears just a tad. So we're going to talk a little bit about throughput of our facility, and pretty straightforward. Again, could be on the exam with the formula here, but it's going to give you the numbers a lot like we're going to go through this example. So we already know the seating capacity of our dining room, okay? Whatever it is, we know what that number is. And now it could change based on the meal or based on the configuration. Maybe you have somebody that comes in and does music, and now you have to take a couple of tables down. But again, you're going to know your seating capacity. The seating efficiency, on the average, how full is the dining room on a percentage basis? That's what seating efficiency is. Table turn time, how long does it take for one guest to start and finish to roll to the next guest in time? Then really important here is the average sale per guest, understanding what that is, and we'll go into depth into that. I can't remember if we do that today or if we do that down the road. And then we measure the throughput target in dollars per hour. And then we're going to compare that against a couple of things, either yesterday, or if today's Wednesday, which it is, or are we going to compare it with all the Wednesdays in February? Because if you compare it to Wednesdays in December, it could be different. So are we going to compare it to all the Wednesdays, all the other days of the week? Again, you need to decide what targets are important. So let's put some numbers to that. So if our dining room is 110 chairs or seats, and on the average during that meal time, we're about 90% full between 4:30 and 8:30. So this example clocks in at 90% efficient. We've got most tables full. The turn time is 1 hour. We can usually get guests in and out in an hour. And the typical average check per guest is 19. So you do all the math here and you get $1,880 per hour. That's our throughput. Can we improve upon that? What can we do to improve upon that? So again, gives you a target to shoot for. You probably already know what that is because your software will tell you that. But again, are you doing well? Are you not doing well? And that type of thing. So you're given a target and you want to make sure that you can do certain things with that by tweaking it. And there's a number of different things you can do. That's the throughput piece. The flow through, this is another, it's a little bit both science and art, is that we know that especially your variable costs grow with your sales. So if you can increase sales and somehow, and whatever it is, keep costs at a minimum to where they're not rising as proportionate with sales, then you get into what's called flow through. You're really doing a great job. But again, very difficult because again, you have to watch out for things that you change that could decrease quality and those types of things. So again, certain things you can change, certain things you can't. The real trick is, and what are some things that you can go to that even though sales are increasing, that you can keep costs low, and certainly benefit yourself as far as the manager as well as the facility itself. So really, you have to take everything into consideration, right? Your break-even point when you're budgeting and forecasting, your throughput, how well your dining room is operating with both staff, the quality of meals and getting people in and out. And then the flow through is keeping costs low, even though your sales are rising. So again, so many different things go into the profit number, but there are people that are really good at that. It does take time. There's a lot of things involved. Again, use your software, making sure you're monitoring it. And again, good people help, efficient training, and those types of things. Questions, comments here? So getting into the next piece, really, I don't want to spend a huge time on this, but profit loss, really the profit loss, it's scary to a lot of people. It's just a history. It's really a compilation of what's been done in the past. And we use it to analyze and understand what has happened in the past over a specific time. We can pull a P&L report for the last day, the week, the month, the quarter. It just depends on what you're trying to look for and accomplish. It really shows us whether we've lost money or made money during a specific time. And sometimes we need to drill down because there are certain events that happen on a much smaller level that we need to understand. The P&L is also called the income statement, but it helps managers gauge the operations profitability, as well as we use this as a comparing tool to what we forecasted and budgeted to what really happened. So this really helps us understand where we missed the boat if we did, or maybe we're right on the button and can keep us going down the road where we don't have to make too many changes. Certainly helps us determine areas where adjustments can be made and made to bring the business in line with established financial goals. And then, as you know, we've already said it has to be profitable. Sales must exceed costs. This gives us a great look in to see if that's something that we're doing. So we do have some things that we can do to manage for that profitability. So here we're going to learn a little bit about how profit goals affect daily management activities, why we actually have to compare actual results against the budget, and then if we have differences or what they call variances, and then the variance percentages, what we need to do when we have one of those or when something shows like that on the P&L. So really, it's all about comparing what we have budgeted, because that's what we expect. It's not going to be an exact science. There's always going to be those exceptions, but we want to try to get what we think is going to happen as close as to what actually happens. So we can always compare our budget to what actually happened over that particular time frame that we're comparing. If there's any differences or what we call variances, we need to identify what those are. It may not be catastrophic. It may just be a bump. It may be an anomaly. It also may be a key in error. So we just need to identify with those and investigate what caused that. A lot of times it's just somebody keyed in the wrong number in the P&L, and now we need to find out, where it is and fix that. Because when we have a lot of numbers at work, sometimes mistakes are made. Want to document findings because is it a one-time thing? Is it a pattern that we need to investigate on why we're experiencing, especially if it's a negative variance and what we've budgeted or forecasted? We need to understand if there's any pattern there, or maybe it's a sign of theft because things aren't adding up. We've got, costs of food going in, we've got costs and revenue going out, and it's just not adding up, and somehow we're missing something. So we need to document any findings, especially for consistent variance, as well as one-time variance. So again, trying to understand where the differences are. If there are things that maybe it's not anything as far as theft, but it's something that's efficiency's not quite right, we need to identify and implement operational changes. So this is a chance to change things up because whatever we're doing, we're kind of hemorrhaging money there. The cost is kind of exceeding what we thought it was going to be, and so we need to make those changes. So we make recommendations for revisions to the budget because the budget was made at the beginning of the year, and if we're three months into the year, maybe we need to make recommendations. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen. We present these recommendations for approval, and then the bean counters, if you will, or the people that are really educated in this area start to look at some of your recommendations and say, hey, you know what, that's reasonable, we'll make that change, or you know what, we just need to do a better job of looking at these particular things, or maybe it's a training issue and we need to get better at the efficiency in the dining room. So when we do come up with something that sticks out, a variance or a discrepancy, we want to make sure that we're well versed in it. So we need to understand the reasons in the variation in the revenue or the expense or even in the profit. So there's 3 areas that we could have differences in what we forecasted. What we need to state those factors that could trigger budget revisions. So here's a formula for that. Actual results minus budget results equals variance. Pretty straightforward, right? So that could be both a positive or a negative number as long as it's not too large. Listen, couple dollars here and there. Again, you certainly want to make sure that you note that, but that might not be huge. It's not going to be exact where your budget is always going to match your actuals. But if you're starting to see consistently high variances, then we need to make some type of an investigation. For reasons, average sale might be going down. Average sale per guest could be going down. Guests just buying fewer items. Maybe we're going through a recession or there's a budget crunch or whatever the case is, but your guests just not buying as much stuff. They're choosing less expensive items. They're coming in because maybe their budgets are tight, whatever, or combination of both, right? Or there could even be a situation that you may have to investigate for potential theft. So again, average sale per guest, what's going on there? If you've noticed it's a pattern and it's going down on a consistent basis, should be a red flag. Product costs, labor costs, understanding what those are, operating your budget revision. So if we need to make some changes, review the operating results, calculate variances and amounts. And the reason we want to do calculate both variances, both amounts and percentages, if you have a category that's high dollar amount, so like labor, if you have labor and you write the thing down as an amount, does $5,000, is that a large amount based on the labor that you pay? Not sure, but if we write it down as both an amount and as a percentage, if it's 15%, that's a variance. Now that's a big deal. But if it's 1% or 2%, maybe it's not as big a deal. It's just $5,000 seems like a big number, but when it's compared to the overall part of it, maybe it's not that big of a number. So again, that's why we write variances down or excuse me, calculate it both in amounts and percentages so that we don't have to waste a lot of time running down things that we may not have to run down. So again, just helps us when we do some of the auditing there. And then we always going to compare our history and industry data to make sure we're on the right track. So we know revenues, the stuff that's coming in, expenses are going out. If we're going to do any changes to the budget, we need to make sure that we document things for anything, whether it's income or expenses. So again, some of the revisions, maybe we've had an opening or a closing of a competitor. Now we have to rearrange some of our budgeting. I will tell you most of the time the budgeting doesn't change long term, but again, it could. Maybe we have to, maybe there's a fixed or a controllable expense that we have to understand. Maybe the financial resources have changed. The financial reporting has changed. Maybe somebody's just decided to go from a Mexican restaurant to a Italian restaurant, or the decor or the types of meals that maybe you've instituted a salad bar or taken one away. So a number of different things that can happen here. So again, just to recap, right? Compare budget to actual performance, right? We're looking for variances. If we have consistent variances to where it's a pattern, maybe we have to put in for a recommendation for approval for our budget change. Okay, so again, always comparing your P&L back to what the actual is. And then if you have to do a revision, review it, calculate the variances, review it for historical industry averages, and then any revisions, make sure there's not an outside circumstance for something like that happening. Cost control tools. So again, we know advances in technology has drastically increased the number of options available to control. So we should have most of this at our fingertips, right? Software programs used to complete calculations. So everything should be at your fingertips. Our software can easily provide better information, more accurate and convenient. So again, we should have no problem collecting any of that data. It certainly can help us running the operations more efficiently, but we should know how it works as well so that we can understand when we're doing the investigation. Questions, comments here? So we want to make sure that we're not every minute, every day, but we want to make sure that we're on top of things, right? Important to take cost control measures in all aspects of the food flow process, from the purchasing to the prep, to the cooking, to the serving to the guests. So again, it goes from purchasing to service, understanding what's going on there. Standardizing your food production helps. Quality, efficiency, make sure that you're able to gauge that everyone is on the same standard. And then your inventory, making sure that there's nothing that's no shrinkage is happening regardless of how it's happening, but closely monitoring that to ensure that products will be ordered more efficiently so nothing spoils sitting on the shelf, that type of thing. Questions or comments here? Okay. Anything else on anything that we talked about today? One last thing before you go today. So this particular class has a project. So remember the first day of class, we talked about recipes, how important they were, and how we can track how much something costs, right? It needs to be spelled out so the quality of the item or the recipe item is not messed up or inconsistent, that type of thing. So it's extremely important, right? So the project for the next 2 weeks is to look at one item either in your workplace or your household and monitor how much of it comes and goes. So maybe it's something that you've just noticed, and I'll just give you some examples. So maybe it's that you give to the guests, you give a snack, some cookies that you put out for any guests that are checking in, and you put them in the lobby. And you kind of want to, over the next 2 weeks, monitor how much is that actually costing the facility that you work at. Or maybe you put free water in the rooms, or the free breakfast that you give, or complimentary breakfast that you give guests. Whatever it is, and it can be at home too. Maybe it's your usage of coffee, or toilet paper, or paper towels, or whatever you want to monitor, over the next 2 weeks. Again, we want to make sure that you're monitoring that. And then we're going to have you kind of run it down as far as what the costs are. So with that, we want you to kind of extrapolate that out. What's the cost per usage of each item? You know, toilet paper could be used in rolls, paper towels, coffee pots, whatever it costs you. I want you to run some type of analysis, and then we're going to talk about it. Each person in the class is going to have a chance to present in the class. It doesn't have to be long. It can be written out on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be a PowerPoint presentation, but you're going to have 2 to 5 minutes to kind of say, here's what I monitored, here's what the cost was, here's how much it would cost over a year's time if we and maybe you don't make a change because it is what it is, or maybe you're going to look for alternatives, or maybe it's something that in the purchasing area you've said, you know what, we have been buying a third-pound burgers, and now we're going to try a different supplier with their third-pound burgers, and they're not going to lose as much weight and that type of thing. Again, a number of different things that you can kind of monitor or study, and use the recipe template as a guide if you need to. An example would be something like this. So an example, a coffee bar, company policies to upcharge for oat milk when it's substituted. So a team member chooses to measure the amount of oat milk used versus the sale report that shows when an upcharge is actually added. After 2 weeks, they determined that the oat milk upcharge was only applied 8 times when it should have been done 36 times. So the example down says the actual upcharges of the oat milk was $16. So that was what was charged. The company policy, if it was enforced, would have been 36 times at $2. So $72 should have been charged. You take away the $16 that was charged. So $56 over 2 weeks was lost because employees were not following the company policy. So you extrapolate that out 26 times for a year, that can get pretty pricey, right? So again, describe your scenario and the impact, and you may change, you may not, but I'll have a couple questions for you after you present. And so in the next couple of weeks, we'll have you each take a turn going forward. And if you don't remember, that's what the recipe example looked like. So again, you can certainly, when you are doing your analysis, if you're doing paper towels, you want to know either how many rolls you're using. If you want to get it down to the single sheet, you can. I'm not looking for that much detail, but you certainly can. But it's up to you. It's your project. What questions do you have of me on the project? Nothing? Oh boy. That's either good or bad. So if you do have questions and want to reach out, no big deal. You can reach out. Next week, we are back in person. We're going to do a small review. I'm sorry, let's before I get into that, there's some chat. So somebody said, are we submitting it or just talking about it in class? You can do both. There's a place to submit it, but what you can do is you're going to talk about it. Again, it doesn't have to be anything formal. It doesn't have to be in a PowerPoint, but in the curriculum, it's going to ask you to whatever chicken scratch paper or document that you have to upload it so that we know that you've done the assignment. So again, you will be asked to present on it in class. And again, it's a very minimal, just recite what you've uncovered. I'll ask a few questions and then we'll go forward from there. Hopefully that answers your question. So next week, first part of the class will be Serve Safe Alcohol lecture. And those that are not going for either a renewal of the Serve Safe Alcohol, or you already have your tips and you're satisfied with the expiration date of that, you'll be excused. You won't have to take the exam, and then we'll take the exam after that. It is a paper exam. It is a Scantron where you have to color in the circles with a pencil. I'll bring the pencils. I'll bring the tests and the Scantrons. I don't know why, folks, they still have us do this manually. It's the only exam that you'll do manually, but it is what it is. So what I need from you is for you to bring your driver's license. We're going to have you write your driver's license down on a check-in sheet, your name, your phone number, your email, and your driver's license. So they have that for your Serve Safe Alcohol certificate. It'll be in person, so we won't need computers that day for that exam. Who has questions now? Yeah, all the material for next week's exam is covered in the next week's class prior to the exam. That's right. When you go in, when you log into your e-learning, that's exactly what we're going to do. Obviously, we're not going to spend as much as time as the e-learning in the class, but we're going to hit the high points. I'm going to tell you what I feel is on the exam, and we'll go forward from there. Who else? Anything else today? If you do have something, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Maria, do you have a question on that? A little confused on the homework? Do you want to reach out to me, or how do you want to work it?
Yes, it has to be an item at work or something at
No,
home.
work at
I think the
home.
one you had an upcharge, so
Yeah, it can be at
guess that part
home.
confused me.
Yeah, you can be at home. Somebody had done how much when she prepares dinner, a spaghetti dinner for her family. She wanted to know how much that costs when she prepares her spaghetti and meatballs for her family. Or somebody's done coffee and how much waste they have, but how much coffee they go through in a year through the pots they make. So there's a plethora of things at home you could do as well.
Oh, okay. I think
Okay.
I just got confused with the upcharge example, but this is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's you can do up charges if you want to, or it's just a flat out cost, so it doesn't matter.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Taylor Garner, can you stay online? When is the week 4 exam? No week 4 exam. We're in week 4. Are you talking about the exam last week, Joanna?
No, the exam, because with all the formulas that you were talking about there, you said they're going to be on the exam. When is the exam going to be on?
So this one's not going to be for a while. Week 10. Oh, is it week 8? I'm not looking at it right now. It's either week 8 or week 10 for the I'm sorry, week 12 is a CHS exam. So it's a long time, but we'll have a review sheet. I'll send that out. So the stuff that we talked about today will be really at the end of class, trying to weave things in there. So that's not going to be for a while.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. The next exams that we got coming up, the alcohol exam, then we got the Serve Safe Food Manager exam, I think it's week 8, and then week 12 we got the Certified Hospitality Supervisor, which will incorporate some of the supervisory stuff we're going to do in week 10, 11, and 12, as well as some of the financial stuff. Next week is just the alcohol. In class, we'll do the review, and then we'll have the exam, but those that have the certification already can be excused. Okay, if there's nothing else, folks, that's all I got for you today. Again, any other questions, reach out, telephone, text, or email, and we'll get you handled. Thanks a lot. Have a good rest of your Wednesday, good rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank
You're welcome.
you.